Hello, welcome back to the Inner. Today I'm joined by my brother, Prophet Jack Njoroo. Hello.
Hello, Nelson. Yeah,
Hi.
thank you so much. As you've introduced myself, my name is Jacob Joroge. Quite a bit of a long name, and I felt like I put the last part of it, Wahome Warugongo. It's the name that I've sort of, part of it is what was given to me, but part of it is what I have found to be the most authentic expression of who I am and my area of calling and work. So I believe there is a lot to them, and maybe if you explore into that, we go to some detail into it. But yes, thank you so much, Nelson.
Thank you for joining me.
Okay.
So, if you could introduce yourself a bit, let the audience know a little bit more about you.
Okay, my name is Joroge Wahome Warugongo. That part of the African name implies my family name Wahome. Warugongo is an expression of where I come from in my native language, which is a Bantu language. One of the larger Africa is a very large place with lots of languages. It means from a high place. I come from one of the slopes, the slopes of that form the escarpment of the Aberdares of the East African Rift Valley. Those who may know a little bit of the geography about it. So it's an expression of that place, and I believe that place of elevation speaks about our calling and a place of understanding, a high understanding that we all aspire to. So that is why I took Wahome Warugongo is sort of like my surname. And I am, Nelson introduced, said, I'm working the prophetic, but specifically my area of calling and practice is in what I call astrology or understanding the times. For those who may find maybe sometimes astrology can be controversial in Christian circles, and I don't mind because basically it describes the understanding of how time is rules of progress and affairs of both man and divinity. So that is where I have found myself working my calling. I got born again in 2018, just about, I think now 6 years ago. And about 4 years ago, during that very chaotic time, during the time of COVID, I got a calling and specific direction to venture and devote my energies into understanding the signs of the heavens as they are inscribed, and also to write up new rules of understanding how the the way we interact with time and the way we understand time and apply it in what we call creative process. So gradually this formulated into an idea about what we call Neoterran astrology. Neoterran astrology is a new community, is a community, and it's a new way of thinking about the realm of time as we experience it here and how it maps on to the eternal time as heaven has predicated it upon the earth and also across other spheres of reality. And in that endeavor, we have founded up a community. It's a community of people who are practitioners. So much of what we do is not is both revelatory, comes from revelation. Some of it comes from scripture. Some of it comes from the things that we ourselves learn and institute. So we are coming up, we're developing a lot of tools of understanding and programming time, and and applying it to the prophetic, because there's so much about the prophetic that is in the dispensation of time, and being able to give incontrovertible evidence. You see, sometimes science, as you're told, science are given sometimes for those who often don't believe. But when you so like even when you see Christ coming, he comes with his attendant to science. The ones who fervently waited for him may not have required the signs, but there are some who may not have been caught up in that, who may have been standing, they're not certain about that, but when they saw the signs, they are convinced fully and they are able to. So that's a little bit of a roundabout way of describing what I do, and maybe may not have, as you go on, I'll be able to offer clarity to some of the issues I've talked about.
Yeah. So, One of the areas that I got to see, I popped into a few of the meetings that the community has, that you've actually been able to create your own calendar. Talk about that a little bit.
Oh yes. What happens is that if somebody was to describe what astrology is today, or what an astrologer is today, their description would be somebody who tells you about your fate. They may be able to tell something like maybe what sort of person you ought to relate with. They may tell you ideas about like compatibility of marriage partners and stuff like that. But if you go back in time, astrology was ingrained in the culture and ways of people, because astrologers basically mainly were people who marked the passage and the cycles of the heavens, and they created a calendar. And in that calendar sprang with everything else about understanding about, like even what people call houses or signs of the heavens. They are very much tied to a calendar. But you've come to a period of time today where people, like how we tell our time depends on electronic devices and other ways. So it has been so much devolved from the cycles of the heavens that people have been, inured into thinking that there is no relationship anymore. But there is something about the fabric of time from the time of creation that the cycles of the heavens were meant to. And when looked at the variety of calendars that are in practice today, none of them would have suited the sort of calling that was given. None of them would have helped us map the kind of structures that heaven needed us to institute upon the earth. So what we did is we created a calendar. It bears basically any calendar that you create is just your best interpretation of the cycles of the heavens, especially the cycles of the sun, of the moon, and other planetary bodies. And we knew that during that time, during that very confusing time during the COVID closures, we understood that there was far much more than met the eye. So there was a sort of a break in the age. So we began a new age. And that calendar is only in this fourth age of the current era. Of course, a calendar shouldn't only look forward, it should be able to look backwards. So we have a way of counting the years and mapping the years. There's a Newtonian calendar, and those who may want to know a lot more, maybe we'll give them details about how they can be able to get it. So since that period in time, we would say as a community ourselves, the last time we used the Gregorian calendar for purposes and intents of our spiritual growth and understanding was on 17th of September, 2020. And from 19th September, we entered a new era of our own calendar, the first day of the first month, or the first year of what we call the era regnum. We call it the kingdom era. So this is very much tied with the kingdom consciousness that I believe we are not the only ones who are calling everyone. I think yourself, you've made even lots of publications about sonship, kingdom consciousness. So it's part of it, and it gels into that kind of waking up. So we are looking into a new kingdom age, our understanding of it. We don't compel, everyone may look at the system we have created and understand it. So we have basically if I just make a little bit detail, it's a lunisolar calendar, a little bit related to the Hebrew calendar, but it's not actually the Hebrew calendar, because like if you look at the Hebrew calendar in the current year they're in a leap year. That means they're in the 13-month year cycle, but ours is not a leap year. We had a leap year the previous year that ended on, I think, on 7th September of 2023. So there is some similarity to the calendars that exist, but it's a very unique one. And according to our estimation, it's the most astrologically and even astronomically accurate calendar in practice today.
Okay. So the way that you developed it, kind of talk about that a bit. Was it just by examining the stars and charting what happens when, noticing when the moon is in full, when it's in new moon, when the sun's rising, when the sun's setting?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, it is. First of all, what happened at the very first, we had nucleus of an idea. What happens, I think this is common to anyone who has maybe being given an assignment by God, right? Even from scriptures, is that you don't get the entire script of what you need to do before you begin it. You have to take a step of what I would call a step of faith, get into it. So when we began, we had a clarity about what we needed to do. First of all, if you look at that period of time, actually there were some astrological signs that happened at that time, and there was like within just a second, the third month of our new calendar, there was this very unique conjunction, planetary conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn happened in a very particular sign and place in heaven, which has a very important implications even for our own community. Like everyone's, even you look at our own astrological profiles, you see that that sign was very important about our consciousness and our becoming. So there were various signs that we had looked and seen in the heavens. I have a scientific background. I'm a trained science teacher. So I have taught astronomy. And before I got born again, I was very much interested in astronomy. I was doing amateur astronomy and would go observe the skies. And when I got born again, I was very fascinated by that world. But when I got born again, I say that place of order and creative and energy and so much complex associations must have a read into divinity. So I was able to go into that. So if it's still, yes, it's still associated with looking at the signs of that happen in the sun. The sun goes through various phases and they have indications about time. A calendar, basically any calendar that you find in the world, will have, it's both an estimation of the cycle of the sun around, okay, well, from an astronomical understanding, we say it's that it goes around the sun, but from an astrological point of view, it is the sun that goes through this 12 heavenly houses. And that marks a year. But the moon also makes 12 also cycles. They are not exactly, if they were totally attuned, would have the sun moving through the entire heavenly cycle in 360 days. Then the moon would make 12 cycles of each 30 days. But because they are not exactly attuned, the moon will complete 12 cycles in about 355 days. And then the year and the sun will take about 365 days. You have to find some mathematical equation of sorts to be able to synchronize them together. Or you could choose, like the Gregorian system, what it does is that it totally ignores the cycles of the moon. So the months in the Gregorian system are not lunar cycles. But if you look at the Hebrew calendar, you look at the Al-Hijri calendar, the Muslim calendar, you look at the Jain and the Hindu calendar, many people actually in the world follow a lunisolar cycle, a lunisolar sort of calendar that integrates both the understanding of the moon and the sun. So ours also follows into that category. But we believe there are elements of it that supersede much of what has gone before. I think we may not take too much pride in that, because if you found something after other people have done it, you have the privilege of doing it a little bit better than they've done it. So we've worked on whatever foundations that were good. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel in so many ways. I don't know whether I've gone into too much detail or whether I have really answered your question even.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
So I want to back up a bit and have you talk a bit more about your, I guess you could say, your born again experience. What was that like?
That's quite an adventure to it. For me to explain my being born again, I would I've explained a little bit of my having a sort of a scientific background, even my teaching and my training. And actually, for about 10 years preceding my salvation, I became an agnostic person who has no faith, basically. And then I became an atheist. And in my atheism, I was not a very full-blown, because I was willing to engage with anyone of faith who would be willing. I was not entirely willing to dismiss the idea of divinity or the supernatural, but I wanted evidence. But I was very adamant that without very incontrovertible evidence about it. Now, my brother-in-law, whom you have interviewed, I'm sure, on this platform, he would talk to me persistently and would discuss long, but I told him that you won't be able to convince me just with words. The only thing that can take a real can make me change my mind is if I get something that is so real that I cannot deny it. And it didn't take much long. I won't go into all the details, but around in 2018, he invited me to his church. And in the midst of what I came to realize later is what he called an impartation service. I've never been in one. He prayed, and when he laid hands on me, I was taken to such a realm, and I heard the voice of Christ spoke to me, first of all, 5 very clear words, and says, "You now know who you are." And with those words, it crumbled every sort of argument, every edifice I had put up against believing. And I knew every one of my former arguments had been shake to dust. And I got born again. That was on I think it was the 10th of December of 2017. And from then on, it became a journey. It was a very supernatural experience. And within a month, actually, because the church where Apostle Daniel Esonga, whom you know, these are very much a practice of examining and really going deep in the supernatural. I was taken through a couple of very profound supernatural encounters. And it would surprise people I used to associate with, because I used to call myself a militant atheist. Some atheists are just happy to be at home and just release one occasional tweet. Myself, I would go out, and even if I found Christians preaching, I would confront them, and we would have these debates, sometimes confrontations with Christians. And therefore, it was a very profound shift from somebody who was very militant in their way of expressing their unbelief. And even on a variety of occasions, I've sat with a Christian, and when I look back, I realized I've said words that were very blasphemous. And now it just made it so much more profound when I got born again. I'm not going to say that maybe other people don't have the same experiences, but I felt like I had an obligation to really start something that would sort of, like, I don't say undo what I had done, but really even convince people who had heard me before that really there's a truth that goes way beyond these other cause and effect laws that we try to convince ourselves is what the entire world is made of.
Okay. So, speaking of Apostle Wasonga, how did you end up getting connected with him?
Oh, as I have mentioned, he is my brother-in-law. So he's married to my younger sister. And I remember the very first meeting we had is my younger sister used to be, she was not an atheist by the way, but we were living close to each other in 2014. And one day, I remember my sister sent me a text and said, "There is this minister of the gospel. I'd like you to meet." And actually, even up to today, I saved my Apostle song as Daniel the minister on my phone. I just did the other day because I was very aghast that my sister, who used to be one of the people who didn't take things seriously, would have met somebody who changed her life so much. And it was on that point that I agreed to meet with him. And by that time, I was sort of frustrated because I had met several Christians. And often you may see some of the debates I've seen between Christians and people who are either atheistic or agnostic. They are people who not willing to listen to each other. So no one wants the perspective of the other person. Because often there's a lot of, if somebody was willing to take an unjudgmental attitude towards the other, so that it's just not a matter of pointing fingers and calling names, then maybe there could be a discourse. So when I met Apostle Esong, I felt somebody who we could have even, first of all, an intellectual discussion. And then that discussion could progress to issues that, we both believed in, but we had very divergent views upon, and we could go on with a conversation. So a series of meetings, it took me like literally 3 years to come to the point where I'm talking about that encounter. So it may be that my brother-in-law, my Apostle Daniel Songa, is my brother-in-law, maybe have assisted it, have helped in making me a bit more curious, because I wondered how. Okay, by that time he was dating my sister. Later on, they started dating, but it took me time. So that is the context within which I met him. But I won't say it's because he was my brother-in-law, but it is because of his uncommon. I think it is, you yourself, you'd be able to understand it, because it was that worried. If he was those, I don't know whether I would call them dogmatic ministers, most likely the conversation would have ended the very first time. But it was somebody who was not willing to dismiss any idea or to take an entrenched view about something about divinity. And I think there is, sometimes it is taken to be like a sign of humility when somebody thinks that they figured everything about who God is. And then somebody like vis-a-vis some, but later I've seen it, maybe it's a sign of even arrogance when somebody totally thinks something as complex as the entirety of the supernatural world and divinity is boxed in within some figured out features you can inscribe somewhere. And that perspective of Apostle Daniel Songa, I don't know whether, I don't want to hold brief for him, but he was able to give me a perspective into the supernatural and what divinity is, that made me, even if not convinced at first, but at least curious enough to want to understand what manner of person, what manner of people are these. It was very different from all the discourse or the arguments of a Christian world that I had received up to that point.
Okay. So yeah, I
Yes.
can understand that. When I first started out, I started out a lot more dogmatic. I think most Christians do. You start out
Mm-hmm.
dogmatic, trying to argue the world into Christianity. So I did that, which means that what I do now is a complete 180 from what I was doing when I first started. At
Yes.
that time, I studied everything in the world, everyone's cultures and religions and practices, just so I could show
Mm-hmm.
everybody how wrong they are.
Indeed.
Now I listen just to listen, giving other people a chance to express themselves.
Okay.
So
It's
I understand that, how dogmatism can get in the way of something very simple.
yes. And I think to a measure, it expresses part of the reason why the church has lost so much influence. And also the promise of what kind of move God is doing, that there could be a person, like, or rather, there could be a group of people for whom it's actually an indictment on both what that there can be, you can have a message of divinity to whom somebody who is atheistic is going to be more receptive to than somebody who is in faith.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
Yeah. And even down to the thing of like the apologetics of it all. I gave up I gave up debates as soon as I tapped into the supernatural, because I'm like, this will win any argument. When I was in the
I know.
military and I would pray for people and they'd get
Mhm.
healed, well, that ended the debate. There
Imagine,
wasn't a
yes.
debate anymore. Now they have a story and they know I didn't pay them to lie, because
Mm-hmm.
typically that's what non-believers are taught, is that no one can do miracles, the supernatural stuff isn't real, and if you see it, it's fake. They just paid those people to pretend like they got healed. But if the atheist is the one that got healed and they know I didn't pay them, well, something's different, something's up here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it causes, just that fast I've gotten them to question reality, and it doesn't take them long. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I noticed is that when an atheist gets healed,
Mm-hmm.
uh they no longer think about their infirmity coming back. They don't think about, oh, this might come back. How long will this last? Let me keep my cane just in case. They don't think like that. Christians do.
Okay.
I've only gotten
Mhm.
that from Christians where they're like, let me keep my cane or my walker just in case it comes back. Um,
Uh-huh.
I might fall later on, I got to use wisdom. But the atheists, the agnostics, they didn't think like that. They said, oh, wait, my leg's healed. They threw their crutches down themselves and was like, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah, you get along. Actually, it's a lot easier. I find that because I also had a bit of an experience with that kind of Christianity before. I think this profound. You said yourself you began this phase of my Christianity now. I think maybe I'm one of the lucky. I didn't come to a system that was dogmatic at all. And for sometimes I would even pause to think, and I say, wow, this is what I was searching for. And the words that Christ said to me, you now know who you are. And by the way, I didn't know at that time, but he said I knew. But he meant you found the right place, you found the right gospel.
Yeah. So you mentioned a phrase earlier, and I'd love for you to expound a bit more on the topic.
Mhm.
Kingdom consciousness.
Yes.
Share a bit more
Um,
about that.
Actually, often when I speak to people, I tell them, you see, lots of Christians these days, you'll find maybe many denominations they have a kingdom in it, but I find the understanding of how kingdoms function is a totally alien idea to many of us Christians because the kingdom is it's a very structured way. It's something that you know there is a common past and there is a culture, there's a language to it, there is a distinction about it, and often there's even a lack of when you go to the kingdom. It's not the individual that matters; it is the collective whole. And you see, like when it says in the Proverbs, "You sluggard, go learn from the ant." It is an expression of that kind of kingdom, creating a system. And if you look actually to cultures like, because here in Kenya we are very multicultural. There's they are they are they are like if you look at Muslim communities, or if you see something like what Apostle Wesonga has a very good way idiom of putting it. It says that if you go to like an Islamic country, you find that everything is Islamic. The education system is Islamic. Their banking system is Islamic. Their calendar is Islamic. Their laws are Islamic. Everything is, even the soil itself, you touch it and it testify to its Islamism. But here in Christianity, we have this way of, I don't know, compartmentalizing things, and you say things like, this is my secular, these are secular things and these are things of faith. So you live a double life, but it's supposed to be integrated. It should be like everything about who we are is for that. It's creating a community sense where there's something about we are to learn from the early church, like even when they had like everything common. So they began a lifestyle of that was about everything. I'm not saying that they are the very example that we look forward to, because I realize you have a very different mandate from the first church. So it's for me, kingdom consciousness, realizing that there is the calling that we have. It goes into everything that we do, everything that we are. And there is no distinction between like your career and your faith. There is no distinction between secular things that you do and the things of faith. It goes into you're able to see and understand that there is an expression. You can speak a language that even animals, the water, can relate to you, because there is that interconnection. But we live a way we compartmentalize, And we are very selfish in our expression and in our way of doing things, that it's mine and everything, and all those kind of words that are not helpful about building something. So it's and specifically when I speak about the kingdom, people are talking about the expected reign of Christ, and people tend to think that Christ is going to come and is going to establish something, but rather we are here to set up the system, to set up the structures. And the kingdom is about there's a way Apostle Sogan, and sorry for quoting him so many times, he speaks about the you are the salt of the world. And he says, in essence, that means you're the elites of this world. That if it is science, or it is the like let's say the art of like even engineering or architecture, the church, or rather we the called one, the sons, because actually we are the sons, when we go into sonship, we are supposed to create systems that are higher, much better, superior, the very exemplars that the world can look upon to and copy our system. It is not just about preaching and empty words, but it's about demonstrating that there's a system that works better. You've talked about it, like when you talk about healing, you use signs that are so incontrovertible that any argument that was necessary is not. Even I myself, I usually have the right now, I would barely really debate an atheist or agnostic, because I'll tell them, there's nothing that you believe that I don't believe. Basically, the laws that we are talking about, science or whatever, I believe them, but there's a higher law. And unless you're coming to that argument about something that operates beyond the laws, that the laws of science and causality, then we cannot have a debate, because there's no way. If you want to talk like the existence of God, I cannot prove the existence of God using like a philosophy like epistemology, or because how God exists is not how molecules and atoms exist. If your definition of what God existing or something existing is how molecules and photons exist, then you can rightly say God doesn't exist, because he's not beholden to that realm of existence. He is in that realm, but he's far supersedes that realm. So often, unless we are able to give people such an experience, and I'm very lucky that I got ushered into that world of that supernatural experience very much on the very first day. And I know many people don't have that opportunity. So I count myself maybe lucky. But that is the sort of kingdom consciousness, such that you eliminate arguments, you eliminate these divisions that people have, and this understanding and pettiness, and you rise up to a system that people will not have any other way. I take myself, if I were to maybe cut this story short, I give the example of Peter on the day of Pentecost and the kind of sermon that what he preached. And he preached with such he talked to those people with such conviction. He didn't have to make an oracle. They are the ones who asked him, what shall we do then? It is the very same thing we are supposed to demonstrate to the world, that we destroy every one of their arguments, every one of their reservations. That is the kingdom. We give them an example of such success, such understanding, such purity, that they have no cause. We don't have to call them. They are the ones who are asking, what shall we do? What can we do then, so that we can come to the very same sort of realm as you are in?
Yeah, you said a mouthful. So
I tend to be.
I can definitely agree to that. And this was an argument I had back when I was a part of Christianity as a whole, was that one of the issues is I noticed is that pretty much weekly sometimes more than that
Yes.
if you win as much as I used to.
Uh-huh.
We were encouraged to go out and evangelize. And they'd say that in so many different ways. Go out and tell somebody about somebody, let that which is in you shine to the world outside of you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let people come up saying, what must I do to be saved? All these different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that the
Mm.
reason that that has to be enforced on a
Yes.
weekly basis is because people aren't encountering God on a daily basis. That any
Sure.
way that I'm encountering what the kingdom truly is, I don't struggle to share it, and people don't
Mm-hmm.
struggle to want it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm just inviting people to my programs and to my rituals, then yeah, I'm going to have to struggle because I might not even be benefiting from the program and the ritual. What I
Mm-hmm.
benefit from is encountering God on a weekly, or well, more so on a daily basis. In fact, during that time, I was meeting God more outside of church than I was in church.
Mm-hmm.
So when 2020 happened and churches shut down, that didn't mean anything to me because I didn't go to church to meet God.
Mm-hmm.
By
You
that
already
point,
have.
I was going to help people.
Indeed.
So I believe that goes into it is that once you have something that you see as valuable, you don't struggle to share it with other people.
Sure.
If I know a secret hack that can get anybody $1 million, well, it's not going to be a secret. I'm gonna share that with all the people I care about. It becomes an extension
Mm-hmm.
of love is to help you elevate. Hey, I found this thing that works. Let me at least show it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that the idea of evangelism is natural, not
It
prompted.
is.
If I know that there's a sale at a store, hey, there's a sale over here. This is on discount. Hey, here's a coupon. That comes
Mm-hmm.
natural to us. That if we know something is, if we found a better way to do something, we share it.
Yes.
That's just the way we're made up. Which means if you find something you struggle to share, that means you don't value it enough. It's not
Sure.
valuable to you. You might feel, you might feel as though you're supposed to share it, but that's not the same as, or obligated is the word I was looking for. You may feel obligated to share it, but that's not the same as it naturally flowing from you as an extension of your own life or as an extension of your own encounters. So, yeah, I can absolutely agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
The kingdom is supposed to be the leading format on changing the world. Mind you, I put on Facebook recently a post that talked about some of the regions that are actual spiritual centers because the world has somehow convinced itself that the US and modern day Israel are the only two places God cares about. And I let them know, I
Yeah.
said, Kenya's the future.
Really? You have no even no conception. There are some things that we may not that are may not that are not yet public, but there
Yeah.
is part of the system they are creating is because we are so much convinced about the centrality of this place and the move God is coming to do.
Yeah.
And
Kenya's the future. We're looking at America. America's had its time. Not saying that there won't be moves of God in America, but if we're talking about global scale actually setting the stage for how the rest of the world works, that's not the
uh-huh.
US anymore. That's Kenya. And
It
it's in
is.
its infant state. It's just starting out. So it's not ready yet, which is why I call it the future. So
Mhm.
I could talk about Kenya by myself, but I have you here. What else can you share about the nature of Kenya and what you see happening on a kingdom level in that region?
Okay. Um, well, there's a lot. Let me just give a small anecdote because you said something about America and Israel. And we've grown up in our lives when America was a superpower in the world and everyone's beholden. But there's a time not too long ago, maybe just within two lifetimes, when America wasn't such a great nation as it is today. There's a time Britain, France, and the European powers were the ones that call the shots.
Mhm.
And at that time, I found part of the, I've done a lot of research about how the development of the world consciousness as we are. And if you go back to 1890s, 1880s, because people, like you come to the foundation of the modern nation of Israel, people think about the Holocaust and Hitler. But the Jews were very persecuted people way before then, all around Europe. And by the late 19th century, in the 1890s, they were looking for a home. And there were a variety of proposals. And one of what is called the Uganda proposal, by that time, the nations of East Africa, not the colonial, just British East Africa, they were not, the nation of Kenya didn't exist as it is. And part of what is modern Kenya was proposed. But it just happens that at the time, the colonials who had come and settled here were some of the most rabid anti-Semites. And therefore, when the report, the British were trying to settle some of the Jews who were being persecuted across Europe to apply. So they proposed that they come here in Kenya. And they sent a delegation here in Kenya. What they wanted was just somewhere that was naturally rich, agricultural, where they could just expand and what. But when they came in here, they sent a delegation. It is said, I've looked at there are some researchers, Kenyan researchers, who have, because some of these are some of the stories that were suppressed, because when they came in here, the colonialists here, Kenya has such a variety of climatic zone. We have even desert climate. So the place they were taken to explore, but versus what the British patrons wanted them to settle in was very different. So they didn't like it at all. And most of those pioneering Zionists, they went afterwards in the United States. And that is about the same time. So the Israel in itself has a very profound connection to, of course, these are what, but it is not, myself, I don't believe it's a coincidence that there was a need for the Zionist movement and is the nation of Israel to at least, even if not establish a permanent stay here in Kenya, but to have a foundation in Kenya. And there is some calling to it. And when they went to America, there was part of the favor that America enjoyed over the next 50 years, I believe, is stemmed a lot from that. And I believe now that calling that was for the Jewish connection, because really there's something about, or whatever we want to say, there's something about Israel and the place like the Holy of Holies where it was established. But there's a connection between that and Kenya that needs to be reestablished. And once it's reestablished and it enters the consciousness of the people, it's one of the plans, I believe, that needs to be in place even for the return of the Christ. Now, to speak about some of the move that God is doing, much of it is not very much in the visible eye, because there's a lot. Of course, Kenya is a very vibrant culture, and I think we are one of the louder people in Africa, so you'd see a lot. So there is the usual church that is going on. But what is happening is actually movements like ours, that much of it takes place in a very, in communities that are willing to discard the more traditional. People maybe tend to think even ourselves that as Pentecostals, we are very revolutionary. But when you work with us, sometimes you find that we are very much stuck in our ways. So there is some conversation that is happening. There are some people who are willing to indulge and really examine and start practicing ideas. One of the things I believe is that Christianity, when it came to us, actually, when the white people, the British came and there was a mix of British. If you come here, you see the more established church, the Anglican church, the Presbyterian church from Scotland, and even Germans and all that. They came and they taught us a cultural Christianity. So what we got was the Western understanding. So it's actually more of the church in Kenya, the mainstream church, is more of a reflection of the culture of Western Europe than it is about biblical Christianity. So right now, people are willing. I believe that when John the Revelator looked up and he saw multitudes of people of every nation, he could be able to tell that they were from every nation because there was something about their personality, their aura, even their dressing and their manner of speaking that spoke about the authenticity of who they were. So even the gospel that we are supposed to practice, we as Africans needed to be authentically African. I'm not saying that every cultural practice that us as Africans needed to have integrated. There are some that, of course, by course of time, culture, people tend to think that culture is very static. It's not, but it's dynamic. There are things that we are always going to leave behind. But there's something about our personality, about our language, about the way we see the world that was essential to that needed to be part of the gospel and our practice. And that is part of what people are. Because we came, when the Europeans came, they told us, you have to discuss everything about your cultural practices, everything that you understood, like even the way we used, because we used to have calendric systems, we would have a way of even keeping records, mathematics and everything, but they were all treated as barbarism, and we threw them away. So it's a way, first of all, even of exploring the authentic divinity that existed in our African practice. And part of what we do even with our calendar, there's elements of it that stem right from that. Ours actually is an observational calendar in the sense that we wait for certain alignments to align with certain places here within Kenya that we know, and that is when we reckon maybe like the beginning of a month or the beginning of a year it's everything. So it's ingrained with that understanding and that ancient association that we had with nature, with the natural cycles and all that. So there are people who are willing, even within the confines of the church, and there are people who are not afraid. Mainly it's maybe the very younger generation that is willing to accept these things. The older generation actually were more custodians because they grew up at a time when some of these practices were there. But when they came to Christianity, they were taught to abhor these things, to abhor that language, to abhor those kind of practices. But we ourselves want to examine them. I don't want to dismiss anything out of hand. So that is part of what is happening very much in Kenya. You may not find it publicized, but it's happening within certain communities such as ours and a variety of others. And I am certain what is going to spring forth from this movement is something that will fascinate the entire world. And as you said it, you're going to put it Kenya there more keenly. The center of what is going to happen next, of the thing that God is going to move, is going to spring from Africa and specifically from Kenya.
Yeah. So before we go, I'd be doing my audience a disservice if I didn't ask you, what would you say is the significance, or I guess you could say the prophetic implication of an eclipse?
Wow. Okay, an eclipse. One of the things that, Christians have been taught is to abhor darkness and to treat it with fear. But actually, darkness is where much of the mystery of divinity is in. Darkness, even when you go to the first account of creation, is that we don't see darkness being created, but we're told darkness there. It was hovering on the face of the deep before light existed. So an eclipse is actually, of course, first of all, from an astronomical point of view, it's not that you don't understand that it's an alignment and there's a shadow being cast between the planets. That's okay. But an eclipse, like let's say, if you say like the solar eclipse, which happens like what happened across the United States the other day. But we were very fascinated. One member of our community is actually in the United States today, and there were things that needed to be said during that eclipse, and we knew we needed somebody of our own understanding and what, and went there and spoke, and it has implications both about what is happening in America. By the way, America, we may feel what, still America has a very important place in the world, even now, and in Christianity, what we have to do and where we have to go. So there were some things that needed to happen. So an eclipse actually usually, it's the beginning, it usually indicates for all cultures that, use the lunisolar calendar. You'll find that every beginning of a month begins with a conjunction of the sun and the moon. So most conjunctions of the sun and the moon don't result in an eclipse, but there's one where there's a perfect alignment. So that darkness actually is one reprint in the creative cycle. You have to begin with the darkness. Even that is why even the 7 days of the 6, whether they call it the 6 days or the 7 days of creation, begin with darkness and then light comes after. Because within that, in darkness is what you can see it. We are told what cast your what upon the deep. So it's an opportunity instead of something that we abhor and we fear and rises up to our what. But it's actually about the promise about what we can speak. That one we believe during an eclipse, especially a solar eclipse, it's a time that there is such a gateway that you can speak creatively in seeding. You see how God would speak. If you read Genesis chapter 1, you see God speaking in very clear ways. He says, "Let there be." That was equivalent to the time of darkness because there's a portal. An eclipse, actually, the way we understand a solar eclipse, speaks about an opening that allows you to begin something entirely new. Speak in creative fashion, say, "Let there be." And there can be anything that you program because you are the divine creative force. God can no longer do creative work on this earth. It is we who do. And the moments, especially of solar eclipses, they speak of that because it's usually a beginning of a new cycle. And when you speak to it, there's a lot more to it. You see, when it comes to personal profiles, there's a certain understanding of certain people who, even were born during conjunctions, and they can speak to that. The lunar eclipse, which happens during when the moon and the sun are opposite each other, is a time of manifesting. So seeding is very different because by that time you are creating something from yourself. It's about influence. You can only influence what you have within you. You can only speak from the abundance of what you have. But when it comes to this lunar eclipse, it happens during the time of the full moon. And it often is accompanied by the color of blood. And blood, it speaks about birth. And it's a time of manifesting. And that time speaks about a time when there is such an abundance of creative energy. You can speak to that time and just about manifest anything that needs to happen. I don't know whether I went too much detail on it.
No, that was a good answer.
Okay.
So let's see. We're going to begin to wrap up. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
Okay. At this point in time, there's very little that you have put in the public space because much of our understanding is we are still at a very formative age, although we are coming to the point where we are going to be publishing a lot. But you can look for at Neoterran Astro. I don't know, maybe you'll put it in the description of the video. I'll give you a link, and it's both across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or X, and you look for that. Even you just type the word Neoterran, Neoteran, Neoterran. We are the only ones who have that understanding us talking about those things in that sense. It will read you directly to us. We have a more of a closed-knit community. We do much of our work from a point where we meet together, but we do have some things that we do online. There are some things that will be going a little bit publicly. This is the 9th month of our year. So on just at the beginning, towards the middle of September, we'll be launching a new calendar. And the 5th year is a very, very important year for us, actually, for going out So there will be a lot of activity. So maybe you can reach out to us, or can just wait for us to, explode into your screens, and you'll be able to find us. But I am very, very happy for this opportunity to speak, and albeit how briefly I can, about the things that we are doing.
Awesome. It's great having you on. So,
Thank you.
what I'll now ask is, would you like to pray for the audience?
Indeed. Um, Today, in accordance to our way of telling time, today is about that we are entering the 10th day of the lunar month. And at this point in time, I'm going to speak about whatever signs we can do with the moon. We dedicate the face of the moon that is in. It's a time of brooding, and it's a time of creating energy. So, or rather, when we pump energy into something, use very superlative words to describe whatever creating enterprise that we are undertaking. So maybe I'll use that kind of language. And we almost here in Kenya, we just about an hour away from sunset, and I'll be speaking about that day. People across the world who are across the Western Hemisphere, they'll be enjoying the new day within just maybe a few hours. So I'll use that language because my understanding of divinity is very much entrenched in astrological science, and it's not controversial. So let us pray. Thank you. We come before you, the Lord of lights, the one who created the luminaries and their cycles, and who created a time such as this, that we may have this discourse, and that we may be able to deliberate on these matters, and that we may yearn even for greater understanding into the things that are. And I'm speaking a new kind of blessing upon every one of the Cave of Mysteries audience, those who are involved in this enterprise, who give their time, their material possessions, and everything, even their creative energy, towards the achievement of the things that this ministry and Brother Nelson is involved with. May their tents of habitation exceedingly be expanded. Let them have the most amazing season. And on this day, as we enter from the 9th day to the 10th day of this lunar cycle, let what part of their work, their careers, experience a new and overwhelming and exerting a totally revolutionary change and acceleration to what they do and to what they crave for. I bring before the sight of heaven the desires of their hearts, their cravings, their most extravagant and most ambitious dreams that they have. They fight fulfillment, they fight new impetus, so the things that they desire and what they crave to see in this world may be fulfilled. Those who may be in the point of searching for purpose, understanding, and new passions, may heaven open in the most awesome way, pour unto their hearts and to their material well-being, and whatever they do to gain economic progress, that they be given a new drive, a new impetus, and they may do it with the new passion and new understanding. Grant us access into every court of heaven that we need to reason, every kind of wisdom that we need to integrate, and every manner of blueprint that heaven has that can help us in making the structures that we are putting in this world of greater consequence. And that when the world comes to us, they find answers, they find fulfillment, they find satisfaction. In the mighty name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome, brother. Thank you again for joining me today. It's been great.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brother Nelson, everybody else who's been listening in. God bless. I'm sure this is one of many more conversations that we have together.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, that concludes this episode of The Inner. Until next time, y'all be blessed.